There. Hopefully now everyone sees the,
Yep.
okay,
That
there we go. Trying to switch some stuff around. All right. So like I said, we're going to talk about dangerous plants today. We have a lot to get through. This might be a little bit longer of an episode, but this is our Science of series. And before we get going, I would really quickly like to take a poll to kind of see who has, maybe this is your first time doing one of these, or maybe this is not your first time. You guys really quickly, yes or no, is this your first Science of series episode, or is this not your first Science of series? So it's like about half and half right now, but maybe. Ooh, looks like no. So good. Yes, no, awesome. So again, thank you for joining us. We will talk about what other topics we have at the end today, but again, thank you for doing that. We will go ahead and get started. All right, really quickly, I do want to talk about two really interesting books that I use for research for this topic. There's a lot of other ones, but a lot of information came from one called Wicked Plants. It's by Amy Stewart. It's a great book. It talks about a lot of the things that we have here in Nebraska, but then also a lot of global things as well. So a lot of South America, Africa, Australia, lots of different things. But if you are interested in this topic, I would highly recommend looking into this book. It's very, very good. I just can find it on Amazon. And then another book is 50 Plants That Changed the Course of History. Again, very interesting topic as well. So wanted to really quickly show you guys those books that I use for research for this time. And then, so this topic of dangerous plants, it sounds really interesting. It's cool. So within the world, there's over 250,000, 300,000 different types of plants in the world. That's quite a few plants. And it's really easy to dismiss them as just simply, like I said, being there. You know, every day you might not thank a plant for something that you did, but you eat plants. They help us with medicine, shelter, food, soil erosion control. They help us with the carbon dioxide and oxygen whole situation that we absolutely need. So we rely on a lot of plants. A lot of people have house plants. It makes them happy. They like to have them in their house. It reminds them of nature. There's lots of different reasons that people have plants. And plants actually are a huge part of our lives if you actually think about it. So, however, some of them are a little bit, I guess, more scandalous than others. They're definitely not to be taken lightly. So again, this is not meant to scare you from going outside, but just give you a little bit more information about what you're seeing and why those plants are doing what they're doing. So really quick, I want to talk about deadly houseplants. So yes, the houseplants that you have, some of them possibly in your house could potentially have some toxicity issues, but again, normally this does not happen. So really quick, I want to see who has houseplants. My mom has a lot of houseplants, and I know she's on today. Hi, Mom. Thank you. But she has a lot of houseplants, and I have a couple, so I want to see how many people have. You have 5, 10, 15, more than that? Let me know. I'm just kind of curious to see who has plants and make this as interactive as possible here. Looks about 0 to 5. It's a good number to have. The people in my office know that I just have not had good luck with plants. I killed an aloe plant. I don't know what I did, but it did not go well. So, all right. So we'll go ahead and get into deadly houseplants. All right, so a lot of people have these around Easter time. They're called peace lilies. They're very pretty. They're actually not a true lily. They resemble what's called a calla lily that a lot of people have, but they're completely different families than the lily family, actually. They're very, very popular. They can grow fairly tall, 3 feet up to 5 feet tall, and they have very large leaves. They're very pretty flowers, and then they usually bloom about the time that kind of that Easter rolls around. So they're not actually true flowers that you see. Those white ones, they're called bracts. And so they're not that true multi-petal flower that you normally see. They're called bracts, and they only bloom for about 2 months, and then they usually, they don't show those white flowers anymore. They just have the really pretty leaves. So one thing that's kind of interesting is that these are kind of toxic to people, but a lot of people don't nibble on them, but a lot of cats and dogs can also do that. In 2005, more people called poison control from this plant than any other plant, any other house plant. So again, it's cats, it's dogs, it's children that are maybe nibbling on or touching and coming in contact with those leaves. It causes that skin irritation. They have calcium oxide crystals in there. And that can actually cause a lot of skin irritation, burning, swelling of the mouth, tongue, and throat. And it even can, in extreme cases, it can cause that upper airway to kind of get blocked. So again, totally fine if you just don't nibble on them and you just leave them alone. They're a very pretty flower, in fact. All right, philodendron. So a lot of people have these in houseplants as well. They're native to South America and the West Indies. A lot of people like them in their house because they get those long vines area, especially if you have them for a long time, and they clean your air. You have to actually have quite a few of them to have your house be clean, but they do a good job at cleaning the air. So every part of this plant contains, again, those calcium oxalate crystals. So if you or a child eat them or nibble on them, you could get really nauseous, you could have severe abdominal pain. If you repeatedly come in contact with the leaves, you can get skin irritations and even cause allergic reactions. So again, those are very rare, but people do. In 2006, over 1,600 calls to poison control were because of this plant. So just kind of something to think about. Ficus trees. A lot of people have these in their office buildings. Some of them are fake, but the ones that are real, they're in the same family as the mulberry tree. So a very common tree that we have here in Nebraska. They're also a very common house plant. If you ever touch them, sometimes people call them rubber trees. If you ever touch them, they're very rubbery, glossy leaves, and they sometimes get fairly large. They're really pretty trees to have, but they're native to India, Malaysia, Southeast Asia. They can be toxic to people and pets, so again, just don't nibble on them. The leaves contain a really irritating sap that can cause allergic reactions. So if you, again, eat it or come in contact with it a lot, that's not saying if you just brush up against it, you're going to have an allergic reaction. This is like if you take the leaf and rub it all over you. Not something you probably want to do, but it does happen to some people. So there's a lot of other ones, but again, I'm just going to give you kind of a taste of every one of these categories. So there's a lot of information that we're not going to cover today, but it is covered in those books that I mentioned earlier if you are really interested. So, all right, so kind of getting into a little more things that people might be very familiar with. We're going to talk about some deadly things that we actually eat. We're fine, but some of the things that they do have with them. All right, so corn. We're Nebraska. We are the corn huskers. Corn is absolutely good for you. It is a starchy kind of vegetable, but you want to make sure that you eat it with a lot of different foods, a variety of foods. So it is a lot of staple food for developing and developed countries. Back in about 1735, corn was imported to the New World, and the people that were in severe poverty-stricken areas like Spain and European countries, they developed this disease called a pellagra. So what would happen is that they would eat a ton of corn. That would be all that they had. It was cheap. It was easy to find. It was just kind of their staple diet. Well, what happens is that corn actually drains your level of niacin, which is just a fancy word for vitamin B3. And what would happen is that people would start developing dementia, diarrhea, dermatitis, and sometimes even death. They called it the 4Ds. So when this made up a majority of your diet, you just didn't get a lot of other nutrients, and that niacin level just kind of depleted. One of the things that's really neat is if you've ever heard of a vampire coming up here in October for Halloween, many British scientists believe that this disease, this pellagra disease, is what kind of sparked the idea of vampirism, so vampires. So pale skin, sleeping during odd hours of the day, not liking the sunlight. So all of these different things kind of sparked that idea for Dracula. So kind of a neat, interesting thing. Today, corn is safe. It is healthy as long as you eat it with a variety of foods. Even if you eat corn on the cob every single day, it's totally fine. I would just eat a lot of other foods. And again, it takes a lot of corn to have this happen to you, but still something to kind of think about and be interesting. All right, rhubarb. I'm sure a lot of people know this one. They always tell you to don't eat the leaves, eat the stalks. So this is really popular vegetable that people will use in baking, cooking, pies, bars, lots of different things. It's a very common plant that you can find in North American backyards and even in parks. It grows wild sometimes. So the leaves contain really toxic levels of oxalic acid. So if you eat this, it can cause weakness, hard time breathing, gastrointestinal problems, Even in rare cases, you can die from it. So the stalks actually contain very small amounts of that oxalic acid, but it's such a low level that when you eat it and you cook it in a pie or something like that, the levels are so low it doesn't really affect us at all. But if you do eat a lot of it, you can get something called hyperoxaluria, which is just those excess oxalate crystals, and then basically what happens is you just excrete it out when you go to the bathroom. So again, leave the leaves alone, eat the stalks. All right, elderberries. Elderberries are very common in Nebraska. A lot of people use them to make jams, pies, jellies, lots of different things. One of our coworkers just gave us a small little thing of elderberry jam, and it's really good. So, but again, it does have some issues if eaten raw. So a lot of Native Americans used this to treat infections. The ancient Egyptians used it to improve their skin and to heal their burns. Today, it's used in supplements to treat cold and flu symptoms. And again, it's a very popular baking tool. But however, the bark, the berries, the leaves, they can be dangerous if you consume them raw. But if you cook them, it's totally fine. So they actually contain small levels of cyanide and then can cause severe nausea. However, you can recover just fine. There's very few people that eat them and die. It's just something that you just kind of feel really crappy for a while, and then you are fine afterwards. All right, potatoes. I love potatoes. So this one was kind of a hit for me, but they're fine to eat. So these guys, if you've ever seen a potato plant, they have these really neat leaves on them. They're a member of what's called the Nightshade Family. So you might have heard of deadly nightshade before. So in those potatoes, when you eat them or buy them in a store, you usually cook them. My grandpa always used to eat them raw, and I've eaten a few raw potatoes in my life, and still here, still fine. It's when their skin turns so green or they've been sitting a long time that it starts to get dangerous. So they contain a toxin called solanine, and when the tuber or the potato itself, you sit maybe in a pantry for a while, you forget about them, they start to turn green, you cut them up and you eat them, that's when that level of solanine becomes very high, and that is a time when it gets really toxic for a person to eat. A lot of times the nerve toxin is also in the leaves and the stem, but again, a lot of people don't eat those parts. The potato developed this because they needed a defense mechanism to insects, disease, other predators. So this was their defense, to have other animals not eat them. If you do eat it, it affects your central nervous system, and it can cause vomiting, diarrhea, headaches, and sometimes even paralysis in very extreme cases. But when you cook that potato, it kills a lot of that solanine, such at a low level that when you eat it, you are absolutely fine. All right, chokecherries. This one is one of the 17 highly toxic plants in Nebraska. I just found that out today. But again, a lot of people make jams and jellies out of it, and it's completely fine when you cook it. So again, this berry will produce cyanide upon hydrolysis, and that just means when a reaction with water. So if there's a big rainstorm and the leaves get really shriveled up and people would eat the leaves or even chew on the bark or the stems of the tree, you can actually get that cyanide poisoning. So it's a very, very small amount. If you take your body weight and take about 1/4 of it, that is how much that you would need to have an issue with this chokecherry. So the fresh, bruised, wilted, dry leaves are what you kind of have to worry about. But again, when you make this into jams and jellies, you're totally fine. A lot of animals, though, are susceptible to this. Cattle, sheep, and goats a lot of the times will eat this, the raw berries, and that is when they have issues as well. But again, when you cook it, it is totally fine. It will kill all that cyanide that's in it, and it will not hurt you then. All right, so we'll take a little break here. I'm not sure if we have any questions or anything.
Monica, we have kind of some questions and some comments. Let's see. We were talking about, there was one question from Anna about, she heard corn was one of the most worthless vegetables to eat because of the lack of nutrients, and did a little research and did find it was lower in vitamins, but higher in antioxidants and proteins. And I did put in an article from Medical News Today in there if anyone else wants to look at that.
Thank you. Yeah.
So good question, Anna. And then Linda Plock wanted to mention, in you might have said this, Monica, but she said corn was not imported to the New World. It was native to the New World and imported to the Old World, which is Europe.
Yes. Okay.
So that's
yes.
correct. Yes. And then let's see, Allison Dather said, when you were talking about rhubarb, she mentioned you do have to be careful of rhubarb after a hard frost because that oxalic acid might move from the leaves into the leaf stalk.
All right. Well, thank you, Allison. I didn't know that. So,
and
I didn't know. So thank you.
Right. I've heard that before too. So I thanked her for that. And I included an article from North Dakota State University Extension on more about information about when to not eat rhubarb after hard frost, if anyone wants to look at that.
Yes, very good.
And then Judy Boma had a comment. She said Europeans would not eat tomatoes for a long time because the leaves resembled potato leaves.
Yeah, and we will actually talk about that too, Judy. The tomatoes are in the same family as that nightshade, and a lot of people were very cautious when they were first kind of introduced. They did not want to plant them. They knew those leaf shapes, and they knew that meant the nightshade family, and they were very, very cautious about doing that, even though they're very highly nutritious foods. So one thing that I kind of do want to mention is that even though these families might seem like the potato family, and we'll talk about some families here in a little bit, there's good and bad, just like everything else. And, you know, we take that relatively, but when we talk about good vegetables, good fruits, good things like that, there's also ones that they're in the same family that are toxic, and then there's ones that are not. So that's a good point. Yes. I did see someone said mushrooms are not plants. Yes, they are not plants. You're right. I did want to include them though because they are kind of the edible thing, and we will actually talk a whole science of series here in a few weeks about fungi. So we'll go more in depth about what mushrooms are and their anatomy and things like that. But I did want to mention a short little snippet about mushrooms. So yes, they are not plants. You are right. But we will discuss them in a couple slides here. All right. Thank you, Amber.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Everybody for the comments and questions. Good stuff.
All right. So we're going to go ahead and talk about the mushrooms now. So one of the ones that we can find pretty commonly throughout North America, you might have heard of them. They're called the death cap mushrooms. Not necessarily a very inviting word for someone to eat when you hear the word death. So just kind of keep that in mind. This is what they look like. They might be found in Nebraska, but my guess is that they probably are not. There's not a lot of information about mushrooms in Nebraska. So if you are a mycologist, a mushroom person, this would be something good to study. We need a good field guide all about Nebraska mushrooms. So someone please get on that. These mushrooms are responsible for about 90% of the mushroom-related fatalities in the world. So they are a very highly toxic mushroom. They look very similar to something called a paddy straw mushroom, which is very popular in Asia. Only a few bites of this mushroom can cause a fatality. The big deal with this is that if you eat them, you might not see symptoms for a few hours. You might be like, oh, I'm fine. They're okay mushrooms to eat. And then that is when you have issues. So they contain a toxin called amatoxins. They cannot be destroyed by cooking or boiling. So that is another issue. So if you get them home, you bake them, you cook them, something, oh, they're fine now. They're not. So those one of those mushrooms that just those amatoxins just simply do not go away. They do cause permanent damage to your kidneys and your liver. And some people that have even eaten them have had to have a total liver transplant just to survive this mushroom ordeal. So it's a very serious thing. They look like a lot of edible mushrooms that we have here in Nebraska. So again, when you go out, you just want to make sure you know what you're looking for and you know how to identify those edible versus non-edible mushrooms. Speaking of edible mushrooms, the ones that we have in Nebraska, the morels, they're delicious. You can find them everywhere, pretty much for the eastern side of Nebraska. They're very good to eat. They're good for you. However, there is something called a false morel, because of course, why not? They're found throughout North America. They resemble those edible morel mushrooms like we have in Nebraska. And these contain a toxic chemical called gyrometrin, which is a carcinogen, similar to something that you would find in like a cigarette. So ingesting small amounts of these mushrooms can have serious side effects. Again, they affect the liver, the kidneys. You get very nauseous, dizzy. Extreme cases, you can have coma, go into a coma or death, or again, that permanent liver or kidney damage. So, all right, I know a lot of people like to eat mushrooms. So I have a question for you guys. Who has eaten a morel or found a morel in Nebraska? To tell you the truth, have never found one yet, and it's kind of embarrassing and pathetic, but I have not found one, but I would like to. So have you guys had any luck finding morels in Nebraska? Yes, no? Looks about 50 per 50, just about 50-50. More yeses than no, so that's good. So they do exist. All right. Awesome. All right. So that was all that I have about mushrooms. Again, not plants, you're right, but I did want to cover a couple of them. All right, so we're going to go on to a category now called intoxicating. This one is not necessarily a plant itself, but it will affect a plant, if that makes sense. All right, so we have this thing called, I think it's called Ergot, however you want to say it. So again, not a plant itself, but rather it's a toxic fungus that infects the cereal grasses like rye, wheat, that kind of thing. And what would happen then, it prefers those really damp areas. So during a especially wet year for wheat or for rye, what would happen is it's a little parasite and it would grow, that fungus would grow onto that plant and then affect that plant. So when people would harvest it, they would then move it and make bread. It would still stay in the bread. Those spores are very, very toxic to someone. So what would happen is that they can remain dormant even then on the plant until those conditions are right, and then those spores will just release. They go into the grains and breads, and then someone would eventually eat them. So what's going to happen if you eat them? It constricts your blood vessels, it causes seizures, nausea, it can even cause uterine contractions, gangrene, and even death. One of the things that's kind of neat is that during the Salem witch trials, there were 8 girls that just in one village just mistakenly and all the same time got this weird disease. They would itch in their skin. They felt like they would just literally dance in the streets. People did not know what was wrong with them. So the only logical explanation is that someone cast a spell on them. So they were witches. So this is the same time about when people found this, that the Salem witch trials were going on. And most likely now, looking back on this, it was a case of that ergot that was in the plants. So they did not have ergot-resistant rye or wheat back then like we do now. People know now, too, that this happens. So what they will do is before they bake it, they will rinse the crops in kind of a salt solution that will kill this fungus, and then this doesn't happen. However, this was still happening within the 20th century. People would even call it what would happen if you eat it, the similar trip to if you would have LSD. So it's a very serious thing that would happen. People would, like I said, go into convulsions. They would dance in the streets. They would call it St. Anthony's fire, that burning sensation under your skin that would cause people to convulse and to dance in the street. So livestock can also eat this. They were affected too. They lost their hooves, their tails, sometimes their ears before they would die. So very serious thing. Now it does not happen just simply because we have the technology and we know what's going on now. All right, so we talked a little bit earlier about some families that all contain similar deadly plants or dangerous plants. Do we have any questions or anything before we move on?
We have, Derek shared that false morels are, let's see, not hollow inside, or they're solid when you cut into them, and then true morels are hollow, and then he even shared 2 Google images comparing the 2.
Awesome,
That was
thank you,
helpful.
Derek.
Yeah, and then Linda Plock, I think she was referring to death caps when we were talking about the death cap mushrooms. She said you should not even pick them up by hand as the toxin can actually go through your skin.
Yes. So again, thank you, everyone. I'm not a plant expert or a fungi expert by any means, so I appreciate all this as well. So, but yes, that's just how it shows how toxic those death cap mushrooms are. You should not even touch them. So thank you. All right, we're going to get a little bit into the deadly families. Some that we have here in Nebraska. I think I picked all the ones that we do so that we can compare them to things that we actually have. So someone mentioned earlier the potatoes and the tomatoes, the Nightshade family. So this is a very large family. Again, there's some that are toxic, there's some that are not toxic. Things like potatoes, peppers, eggplants, tomatoes, even some of the spices that we have like cayenne and paprika, they all belong to that same family. A very characteristic thing of this family is the shape of their leaves. So again, a great image right here, this tomato leaf is very similar to all the plants in the Nightshade family. They have a very similar leaf structure. They all contain that solanine, which is toxic in very large concentrations. One of the most common ones that is in this family is called that deadly nightshade, or sometimes people call it belladonna. So it is, again, something that's very toxic to people. Many of these plants, they contain alkaloids that cause things like hallucinations, seizures, deadly comas, even the petunia, a very common plant that people have in the spring in their gardens, is in the nightshade family. So again, just don't nibble on your petunias or your potato plants, but they have always been kind of viewed with distrust. People know what nightshade looks like, and they don't like, they're very cautious about eating it and planting it, even though like things like tomatoes, peppers, eggplants are very healthy and have a lot of vitamins and minerals for us. They simply were just like, nope, it looks like a nightshade, I don't want it. All right, this one was so interesting to me because I did not know that poison ivy and poison sumac and cashews were in the same family. So this is about a 700 species family, contains things like the poison oak, ginkgo trees, cashews, mangoes, pistachios, poison ivy, so lots of different things. And one thing also is that we have poison ivy in Nebraska, but we actually do not have poison oak. So two similar things, but we have poison ivy, as you see this plant right here. This family has trees and shrubs, which kind of makes it hard to recognize what's all in that one family, but they have a, everything will produce kind of a, what's called a drupe. It kind of is a fruit-like structure that will have surrounded by a hard pit and then be surrounded again by juicy flesh. Contrary to belief, peaches are not in this family, but things like cashews and mangoes are. This family basically produces a really bad toxic rosin, again, like if you would brush up against a poison ivy plant, that has really painful side effects like rashes and itching. So poison oak, poison sumac, poison ivy all belong to this family, like I said. Cashews, one thing that's kind of interesting is when you buy cashews in a store, if you've ever noticed, they never have the shells. So the shells, they need to be taken off and cleaned, because otherwise if you would touch those and crack open a cashew, you touch that what's called urushiol, that toxic irritating rosin, and it will get on your face and it will make your face really rashy. Same thing if you ever go to a place with mangoes, do not grab mangoes off a tree, and if you eat it, you will get this rash all over your face. One of the people in our office mentioned that he got what's called a mango rash, and that is because he didn't wash it first. He got that toxic rosin all over his face. All right, very familiar nettle family. They're like everywhere during spring season. One thing that I didn't know is that you can actually eat nettles. People boil them and put them in teas and salads. So when you boil them, those little hairs that we'll talk about here, they're removed when they're boiling, and then they're safe to eat and put them in teas. So in Nebraska, one of the main nettles that you will see is called the stinging nettle. So they have these little tiny urticating hairs on them that what happens is they will actually get in under your skin and release a very, very small, minute dose of poison that when you brush up against it, it causes a really bad skin irritation. It's itchy, it's painful, it inflammates your skin. But they do look very similar to mint or basil, especially mint. So again, just know what you're looking for and know what you're touching before you touch it. So they have histamines in them, that little minute dose of poison that goes into your body. Sometimes, depending on the species of nettle, can itch or burn for about 12 hours. Otherwise, if you brush up against some nettles, some stinging nettles in Nebraska, couple minutes, 5-10 minutes, it's over, it's done. It's not fun, but it does go away pretty quickly. All right, carrot and parsley family. So again, this is something that there's good and bad within the family. This is things like carrots, dill, fennel, coriander, all these different things. But then you also have something called bishop's weed, which is in this family, and they are what we call phototoxic. So phototoxic just means that they have to be in contact with light or sunlight and also your skin. So combined those two things, they cause a really bad rash. And something called bishop's weed is actually so strong, when you touch it and it comes in contact with that light, it can permanently darken your skin. It will just never go away. It's just something that permanently affects your skin after touching it. The same thing in this family, you have things like water hemlock, poison hemlock, cow parsnip. They contain neurotoxins and very bad skin irritants. So as long as you don't nibble on the tops of carrots and eat the orange part, you will be fine. All right, so allergens. We're going to move on to this. Again, not deadly plants, but again, dangerous plants and kind of annoying plants, if anything else. Right now, a lot of people are experiencing ragweed allergies. So I'm sure a lot of you guys have this. These are often very confused with goldenrod and ragweed. If you're not familiar with them, they look very similar to each other, but there are some differences. So with ragweed, each plant produces about 1 billion, yes, 1 billion with a B, billion grains of pollen each season. They can travel several miles. They can remain airborne for a few days. Sorry, there's an annoying fly in our office. And they cause about 75% of all the allergies that are out there, just this one plant. What's interesting about these plants is that if they come in contact, their pollen grains come in contact with another plant that has similar protein structure, like a cantaloupe, a banana, a watermelon, they can create new cross allergies. So of course that would happen. But they will release more pollen as well when our carbon dioxide levels are high. So that being said, with everything going on with climate change, we might just see more and more problems with this ragweed. All right, so another kind of annoying thing that we have is an invasive species, and if you join us next week, we'll talk all about invasive species. But this grass, Cogon Grass, it's actually native to Asia, but it's pretty, and a lot of people wanted to plant it. It was actually introduced in Alabama accidentally, but then it was planted intentionally in Florida. So it's now widespread across Florida, Alabama, Mississippi, Georgia, kind of that area, and it has displaced about 1.25 million acres of native animals and plants. So it's just this bunch of grass. If you notice, the top feathery part is really pretty. A lot of people in those areas will grab one, they'll take it with them, it's pretty, they want to touch it, and then all of those little seeds get displaced everywhere. People thought that planting it for erosion control and grazing for cattle would be a great idea. The only thing is that these plants are sharp enough to cut the lips and tongues of cows, and then they realized that this was not a good idea. So now we have it everywhere. Some other grasses that we have some issues with, prairie cordgrass is nicknamed ripgut because, again, very sharp, toothed edges for when cattle or other grazing animals would eat it. We have something called pampas grass. Those feathery plumes, which is the picture that I have here, people take those off and, again, carry them because they look cool, and then they drop them, and then those seeds get planted somewhere else. We have Timothy grass, Kentucky bluegrass. A lot of people have that in your yard. In Lincoln, that's probably 99% of the people that have grass, that's what it's going to be. They actually cause awful suburban allergy. So a lot of the times, if you have allergies, you can thank that lawn that we have. And then Johnson grass. These are very invasive in the US. The young plants contain enough cyanide so much that it could kill a single horse. And then a lot of the times, death is caused by that cardiac arrest or respiratory failure. So grasses, again, are not to be taken lightly. Some of them are absolutely just fine, but again, you have those other ones that are not so fun and or that invasive bunch of grasses. All right, so we picked a lot of different things, and again, I could have made this 2-3 hours with all the information that I wanted to put in here, so I tried to keep it short. We have just a couple more that I'm going to mention, but does anyone have any questions or anything like that?
We had some, Monica. Anna asked, what is a cross allergy? And I think she was referencing when you were mentioning ragweed and
yeah. Yeah,
chat about that for a minute.
Yeah, so if the ragweed protein pollen comes in contact with, let's say, a banana pollen, it can create a whole new system of allergies. So that is the way that I understand it. So it's happened, not a ton, but they have found that ragweed and those certain types, bananas, cantaloupes, I think it said watermelon too, all of those have similar proteins to each other, so they can basically hybrid and create a whole new allergy-prone plant, which is awesome. So good question.
Yeah. And then Mary Anna Anderson, she said ragweed flowers are not showy. Golden rod has different leaves and very showy flowers. I think you mentioned that. And then Linda Plock mentioned there are 2 types of ragweed in Nebraska. And Anna Foster said, she asked, so you don't become allergic to the actual fruit. Maybe she's mentioned.
No, not that I know of. No, it almost is like 2 different species coming together to create a hybrid, which they obviously don't intentionally plant though. So the way that I understand it, you do not become allergic to like bananas or cantaloupe or anything like that. Good questions.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so we just have a couple left, and then we will go ahead and end. All right, so one I'm sure a lot of people have heard about before is called white snakeroot. So this is one of the highly toxic plants that we do have in Nebraska. It is perennial, so it grows twice a year. Can grow 3 to 5 feet tall. They have very short branches and these really white, showy flowers. Every single part of this plant is toxic to mammals, and including people, because we are mammals. Livestock will actually eat them, but they sometimes know to not eat them, but they do have kind of a sweet smell. And what happens is that livestock would eat them and then they would die. And back in when we didn't know what this was, why are these livestock dying? We have no idea what's going on. They eventually found out that it was this plant a lot of the times called white snakeroot. If you've heard of Abraham Lincoln, which I hope everyone has, his mom actually died from what we call milk sickness. So what would happen is a livestock would eat this plant, it would go through their system, they would produce milk, and then someone would drink that milk. So she actually died from milk sickness. Very common back in those times, again, not common now. In the 1920s is when people finally realized what this plant did. So that's not very long ago. Again, 100 years ago, we just were figuring out plants. So the toxic chemical is that trematol. It can remain active even if the plant is dried. So not necessarily if you would hay this plant for some reason and would hang up and you touched it or you ate it, same thing could happen. All right, a plant called death camas. This is, again, one of those uninviting plants, but it looks very pretty and showy. There's about 15 species found across North America. In Nebraska, it's found in the western, about 1/3 of the state. So it's not a huge range in Nebraska, but sheep are very drawn to this plant, especially in the springtime when there's nothing else to really forage on. This is the plant that they kind of are drawn to. It causes drooling, frothing of the mouth, a weakness, irregular pulse, and sometimes even eventually death as well. If you've heard of the Lewis and Clark expedition, one of the things that happened when they were coming through the Great Plains areas is that Lewis and a bunch of the other men became very ill. They weren't sure what happened, but now historians looking back on this, they think that death camas and blue camas look very similar to each other. And the Nez Perce, the tribe that they were kind of in the area of at the time, they think what happened is that they accidentally picked some of this death camas and then gave that to them. So blue camas you can eat, it's edible, it's fine. They look very similar to each other though, and they think this is what happened and made those men and Lewis sick during that Lewis and Clark trip. All right, so again, not a plant at all, but instead of bacterium. Toxic blue-green algae is something that we've kind of heard a lot about, especially in the fall. Some places across Nebraska have had toxic algae blooms. So what happens then is that it reproduces and releases those toxins into the water. It's a serious threat to animals and plants. If you've been following, we all the time at Game and Parks, we put, don't go to Pawnee, there's a blue-green algae bloom. So we want to make sure people know because it is highly dangerous. Even if you don't go in the water, but if you eat contaminated fish or you drink it, you could have seizures, vomiting, fever, even in extreme cases, paralysis and death. So fertilizer plays a huge role in algae blooms. It just gives the algae something to eat. So it blooms even more at that time. They release what we call hepatotoxins. They can cause liver failure, and then those neurotoxins, they can cause paralysis. So again, not a plant, but something still to mention. All right, water hemlock. This is regarded as one of the most dangerous plants in the United States. It is found in Nebraska. You can find it in ditches, swamps, meadows, pretty much anywhere where there's kind of a wet area. A lot of people think that the roots are something that they eat and edible, so they eat them and they get very sick. Even one bite can cause someone to vomit, have a seizure. It affects your central nervous system, and even a small bite could kill a child. So a very small dosage of this plant can have extreme cases and extreme effects. A lot of times animals like livestock are very tempted to graze on this because it has a very sweet taste. However, like other poisonous plants, they don't usually. This one does. So the roots produce a very thick yellowish liquid that is that poison. So if you ever see this plant and you see that yellow kind of oozing from it when you break it, that is something to stay away from. All right, and we also have something called poison hemlock. This is native to Europe, but is found everywhere in Nebraska. It contains very high levels of alkaloids that affect your nerve function. All parts of the plants are toxic. The seeds are the worst, and the roots have the least amount of toxin in them. So again, even during drying, this hemlock can still be problematic. These plants, they smell really bad. They smell like mice or mice urine, kind of a really bad flavor to taste or to smell. So usually livestock stay away from it. But again, that water hemlock looks very similar to this, and it has that very sweet smell as well. So if for some reason people or animals would eat it, they can lose their appetite. They have nervous trembling, low pulse, paralysis, coma, death, very similar to everything else we've talked about today. All right, so again, I didn't want to scare anybody. I didn't want them to be like, well, I'm never going outside and touching a plant now. But there are a lot of plants that you can touch, and we encourage people to touch. All of these plants on here that I have, plus many more, are very easy to find, very common. They're okay to touch, and they have some really cool textures and different shapes on them as well. One of them, I was talking to my coworker who used to work at Fontenelle, and she said garlic mustard. It's an invasive species, so please pick it. They would grab it, and then it smells like mustard. They would always talk to people about how on Fontenelle tours and trips, they would always take that and smell it and have the kids smell it. So again, please pick the garlic mustard, use it in pesto, whatever you want to make, but again, please pick that one. All right, so that's all that we have today. It went a little bit longer than normal. We had a lot of information that I wanted to talk to you guys about, but if you are interested, next week we will have invasive species, same time, Thursday the 24th from 3 to 4 p.m. Central Standard Time. We're going to talk all about invasive species that we have in Nebraska. So things that affect economic, people, native animals and habitats, all of those different things. All right, and then here's the schedule for the next 5 weeks. We have some other ones coming up, and then Thursday, October 15th, we will have a bye week. And then for very last one, my coworker, Grace Gard, is actually going to join us, and we're going to talk about Nebraska fish. All right, so that is all that I have for you guys. Please, again, join us next week for invasive species. Just letting you know, the recordings will be up probably tomorrow afternoon or so. So if you know someone that wanted to watch this and didn't get a chance to, they will be up for later viewing. And then I also will send everyone that participated today the email address that you guys used to register. We're always looking at how to improve our programming and ideas and things like that. So I will be sending out an evaluation. If you wouldn't mind filling that out, take a couple minutes to fill that out, that would be great. And then also, I did want to share with you a very cool website that has some information that we talked about today. I think all of you guys, can you guys see this website, Nebraska Toxic Plants?
Are you sharing your screen?
I'm going to share my other screen. There we go.
Okay, don't see it yet.
All right. So here is, if you just Google search Nebraska plants, toxic to livestock, this is where I got a lot of the information. It does talk obviously a lot about livestock and animals that have issues with these plants, but it does have some very good pictures. It has some good information. It shows you the ranges of these plants. It is $12, but you can download the PDF for free, and that is just what I did. So it's kind of a long document, but it is there for your resource. So very, very good resource. It was from the University of Nebraska-Lincoln, so it is natural, native to Nebraska. We can figure out what we have here. So yes.
Monica, there's a few questions of where that link will be of this recording, and you mentioned, you said you're going to email it to them, is that correct?
For this link or the link
for this recording of this
yes,
presentation
let
today.
me stop sharing my screen here, and I will actually put it in the chat.
Oh, great.
So if you guys go to just outdoornebraska.gov/online education, if you go to that link, it will take you to a page, and then it is under what's called the Nature Videos tab. It has all the other ones that we've had in the past, and this one will probably be up at the latest tomorrow afternoon. So, but yeah. That's it. So does anyone else have any other questions? Again, thanks for joining us, guys. It's a little bit longer than we normally do, but I had a lot of different information that I wanted to show you. The 50 Plants book was called 50 Plants That Changed the Course of History. I will put that in the chat here. And it is by Bill Laws. I will send that to everyone if you are interested. So again, a little bit longer of a presentation, and again, not my forte, but if you guys have any questions or comments or anything, I would love to hear them. You can go ahead and email me, and if I can't answer things, which totally is a possibility, I will send it on to someone that can and get back to you. So thank you, guys. See you next week. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm glad I can make someone laugh. Don't nibble on your petunias. Yes. All right. If you guys want to stick around, maybe like a couple more minutes, we will certainly be here. Otherwise, we will see you next week. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Amber, by the way.
Absolutely. It's fantastic. Oh, Queen Anne's lace, Monica. Wild carrots is in Missouri. Does this grow in Nebraska? I think it does grow in Nebraska, if I remember correctly.
I am pretty sure it does. I was trying to get a range map here.
Judy is shaking her head.
It doesn't? It does?
No, like, okay. I mean, nodding her head, and I can't unmute her, so I'm sorry.
That's okay. So yes, it does occur. I'm not exactly sure of the range of it. I can find that out for you and certainly email you.
Judy's saying small range. Thank you, Judy. I appreciate it. I love the questions from the kids today. That was exciting, and I love seeing all the kiddos joining.
Yeah, it's a little bit longer of a presentation, I admit that, but hopefully the information was good. I think we're going to do another one talking about using that book, 50 Plants That Changed the Course of History, and kind of how it shaped Nebraska. So great. I like history, so adding some of that stuff in is always nice too.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. Well,
Judy said it was everywhere in Maryland, but I have seen it here.
Yes.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure we do have it. Yeah. So.
I've heard of it here.
Yeah. Well, thank you, everyone. We will see you hopefully next week. Thank you.
Thank you.